let's talk about the very serious escalating situation in Lebanon. Overnight, in fact, for something like 24 hours now, but overnight, Israel pummeled Lebanon with something like 1,600 bombs, and I think they continue apace. Some of the footage was pretty harrowing. You could hear people screaming. Thousands and thousands, tens of thousands of Lebanese people trying to flee the country, certainly fleeing their homes there in the south of Lebanon, where most of the bombardment is happening. This is a massive escalation. We talked about it last week. Obviously, meanwhile, Hezbollah, who are the real targets of this, continue to fire rockets into Israel. And I suppose the big question is, will Israel follow this bombardment with a land invasion? Let's talk to a man who we talked to about this last Friday, and it was fascinating stuff, but it seems to have moved on since then. He's in Kabul at the moment, former defence attaché, military defence analyst and expert, Simon Diggins. Simon, thank you for rejoining the show. Oh, is he not in Kabul? It says he's in Kabul. No. Oh, you were in Kabul. You're not there now. In Kabul. I didn't look very Kabulish behind you. Anyway, nice to have you on board anyway. Yeah, what about this extraordinary night of pummeling? I think the death toll is now up to around about 600, thousands and thousands injured, tens of thousands trying to leave or having to leave their homes, if not the country, traffic jams everywhere. So this is a massive escalation on the part of Israel. And you have to ask, what next? Does this preempt a land invasion, Simon, in your view?
It is one of the possibilities which is there. Good evening, Kevin. It's not entirely clear that Israel is going to do that, and there are many sort of countering voices to them, pointing out what happened the last time they invaded properly, which was in 2006. Again, the same target existed then. They were trying to militarily defeat Hezbollah, but they had to withdraw after about a month. So there will be concerns within some of the Israeli generals pointing out some of the problems with it. The issue is, what do you do? I mean, you can continue to conduct this violent aerial assault upon Lebanon, causing lots of casualties, and as you say, creating a sort of a human wave of people who are leaving. The figures are over 100,000 now, having fled from the south. But to what end? It will not destroy Hezbollah. It will write down its capabilities. Indeed, the Patriot attack last week did, but it will not destroy Hezbollah. And then it does not easily, I hope, then convert into a long-term strategy, which at some point means some kind of peace, not just in northern Israel and in southern Lebanon, but also in Gaza itself. And so tactically, Israel will always have the upper hand. But where's the strategy? Where's the long-term aim for all of this? And that's, I think, is the challenge that many people, particularly in the West, are asking. Where does this all lead to, except for more violence and potentially a wider regional conflict?
As I say, figures are not completely up to date, but certainly the last verified figures were more than 560 people have died. That's quite a death toll, including 50 children and many women. Netanyahu has addressed the Lebanese people to say, our war is not with you, our war is with Hezbollah. As I say, overnight, where it was described that nightfall never really fell last night. There was this strange orange glow over all of Lebanon due to the many explosions. You can watch the video. It's quite striking stuff. The point is that more than 1,600 targets were hit by these bombs. We're looking at them now. And Israel said, well, these were strategic targets, military targets. Are you convinced that they all were military targets, Simon?
No, I think the challenge we've got is to recognise that Hezbollah is, for us, a prescribed force. But for certainly one section of the Lebanese people, the Shia people of the area, they see themselves, Hezbollah, as their defenders. I mean, Hezbollah has got adherents from other elements of the population in Lebanon, but it's very much seen as a sort of sheer defence mechanism for the future. And I think that's where the challenge is going to be. So when Netanyahu says that if you have a bomb in your garage or whatever it is, we'll attack you. Actually, you're attacking the people, the Shia people of the Lebanon as well. And we violently disagree with some of their approach and their attitude. And I think most of us have nothing but contempt for Iran and its behaviours. But nonetheless, Hezbollah, in the same way that Hamas represents a viewpoint of the people of the Gaza, so does the Hezbollah represent that. And they are wider than just military. They have their own social networks, they have their own supermarkets, they run health services, they run 5 hospitals, which are named as Hezbollah hospitals. So are these legitimate targets for Israel? And that's what I find strange as somebody who's both been involved in counterinsurgency campaigns and studied it for most of my military career. The essence of a counterinsurgency campaign is to separate the people from the terror groups or the guerrilla groups or whatever they do. This will not work. This will not terrify them. They will bunker down, as most people do. They'll resent Israel, and they'll just store up trouble for the future. As I said, tactically, the Israelis can do what they wish. They're incredibly competent, very intelligent, ingenious, but there is no strategy, discernible strategy, what they're trying to do. And I think that'll be even more the case if they decide to conduct a ground invasion of the Lebanon.
Something you said on Friday was ringing in my mind all weekend and continues to do so. It was this, that could it be that Netanyahu, the consummate political survivor, a man who is hanging on by his fingernails, but may see his future as the war leader that Israel looks to. They may not look to him too much in peacetime, but if there is war, they may feel Netanyahu is a good man to be in charge. And as such, is he in pursuit of eternal war?
That is an argument that's put. I put it on Friday.
Yeah.
It's put by many Israelis that politically, both politically in terms of his party political, but also his own personal survival, he has no interest in a peaceful solution. The story he told, the narrative story he told the Israeli people is that you do not need to have a viable 2-state solution because we can keep the Palestinians divided and we've got sufficient firepower and support from both the Americans and ourselves to some extent, never have to compromise with them. After the horrors of October 7th, and nobody should hide the horrors of October 7th, it was almost like he now had the opportunity to demonstrate what he meant. But actually, as it's proven, it doesn't. There's no end state to this. There is no way you can walk back from this. So the more violence he inflicts on the Lebanese people, the less likely it is there should be a ceasefire, and therefore less likely to be any kind of sustainable peace and stability within the region. It walks him into a place where essentially his only policy is war. And that's war as a policy, not as a means to achieve a political end, which most people who study war regard war as a means to an end. For him, war fighting is the end in itself.
Okay, so let's cut him some slack. Let's say that he does have a plan and it goes beyond eternal war for his own survival. Let's say he does have a plan. What could you construct around what's happening that would denote some kind of mission destination? What if he has more than a plan to just wage eternal war? What would it be in Lebanon, given what's going on?
Well, there is an intermediate position, which is something where Hezbollah has failed to do what it said it would do in 2006, which is that Hezbollah agreed to move its military forces to the north of the Litani River. And the Litani River runs about 18 or so kilometres north of the Israeli border. And whilst this would not materially affect the use of longer-range missiles, clearly not having them right literally toe-to-toe with the Israelis on the border would make a difference. So part of that solution, part of the, if you like, an intermediate objective could be to persuade Hezbollah to move north of the Litani River. So there is something there. But Hezbollah themselves at the moment are saying they will not cease their operations until there is a ceasefire in Gaza. So we have this kind of standoff between these two forces, neither of which at the moment can see a way to break free of what the positions that they've taken. But yes, there is a potential for a slightly more peaceful solution in the end in the Lebanon if all sides can be called upon to cooperate.
We discussed on Friday, and I want to get your take on the latest situation. How will Hezbollah, right now, I think they're pretty reeling. I think all of Lebanon is reeling. But Hezbollah, they will regroup. Now, we talked last week about what would maybe constitute total war. Well, I suppose that would involve a land invasion by the IDF. But apart from that, we are that close to what you would call total war. You can't pound a country with 1,600 bombs overnight and kill 600 people without calling that a state of war. So I guess my question in a long-winded way, Simon, is how will Hezbollah react? What can the world expect going forward?
Well, they will do what they're doing at the moment. They will respond when they can and fire missiles into Israel. In terms of how they'd respond to a ground invasion, my understanding is they're well trained in this, and they've thought about how they would operate guerrilla tactics, basically sort of use the extended lines of communications Israelis would then have to create in order to make it life very, very difficult for them. The one thing that we haven't really necessarily talked about at the moment is their very long-range ballistic missiles, which have been supplied to them by Iran. And the feeling about these is that they will not use those at this stage. It's not simply because they are worried about, if you like, the wrath of the Israelis coming down upon them, but those missiles were given to them by Iran really as part of Iran's own protection in the event that Israel was able to launch a significant attack upon Iran. The analogy you might look at, going right the way back to the Cuban Missile Crisis, is the Soviets placing missiles on Cuba itself, close to America, so that if America or the West decide to attack, and we have missiles in Turkey, decide to attack the Soviet Union from, say, Turkey, then they had a means to respond. So these missiles that are controlled by Hezbollah are basically are there for Iran's protection, and it'd be unlikely, unless Iran gave permission to Hezbollah, that they would be used. That they are very powerful and could easily hit targets throughout most of the length and breadth of Israel. But at the moment, they've not been used.
And what about terrorism around the world? Can we expect, well, I assume that countries like Britain and America should at the very least be on red alert right now. Would you predict, it's a horrible thing to have to predict, but would you predict that there's a potential for terrorist attacks?
Yeah, I think that's certainly a reasonable possibility, and I'm sure our security services are looking at that option. I mean, bear in mind that the response may not be immediate, so it may not be directly related to whatever happens in the next 3 to 5 days, or even a week or so within Israel itself. But it may be something which people then use as a justification for some kind of attacks in the future. So I think it's a very reasonable surmise that our security will be threatened as a result of the operations that are taking place at the moment by Israel into there. They'll look for an opportunity, not least which because basically they accuse us of sheer hypocrisy. We worry about every life that's lost in Israel, but the lives that are lost in Lebanon. We appear, I don't think that's true, but they can make a plausible case that we don't care.
Quite. Now, last question really, Simon, for now, although I suspect we'll regroup fairly soon because this is a fast-changing situation. The role of Iran. Iran right now is happy for Hezbollah to catch all the flack, to stay in the background, pull the strings, but not get too involved. Will they continue with that?
Well, it's a really interesting question because the response we've had from Iran up until now has been controlled, is the way I would put it. So whilst they have conducted a series of major attacks, they've always been slightly conditioned by the potential response. So lots of rhetoric, always a response. So they don't ever let anything taken down, but they don't try and overreact or escalate upwards from there. And you saw that in the kind of exchange, the Israeli attack on the Iranian consulate in Damascus, followed by the missile attack from Iran, followed then by an Israeli counterattack into Iran itself. But it was all quite measured, all quite controlled. But this is on a different scale. And the question then is for Iran, what they're going to do. Now, Iran today has said that Hezbollah can't stand this on its own. So there's some indication that Iran is considering its options and what it might do to up-pressure the pressure on Israel itself. Where they would actually themselves try and conduct direct attacks on Israel is probably unlikely. They may try and do something fairly symbolic, which is why presumably the Americans are moving some of their warships into the Eastern Mediterranean, potentially in preparation for some form of Iranian counterattack. But the question is, what can they actually do that would have a significant effect on Israel, given the geographical distance between them, the limited number of ballistic missiles they've got? The answer is not a lot. So they'll be calculating the odds as well. They'll support Hezbollah through rhetoric. Whatever they can do in terms of targeting and intelligence, they will be doing. But will they do anything significant militarily directly? I'm not sure. They might attack allies. They might find other targets which they regard as Israeli targets. But whether they'll attack Israel direct or not, I think is maybe less likely.
So the very final question, I mean, this not to exaggerate at all, but in terms of doomsday, we're about 1 minute to midnight, aren't we? This is a very, very tense situation, more tense than we've known, since October the 7th.
No, absolutely. I mean, the attack in Lebanon really unlocks all sorts of chaos across the Middle East. It itself is a very fragile, fragmented country with a very delicate balance between the ethnic and religious groups within it. But those ethnic and religious groups have their own partnerships and associations that goes across the wider Middle East into Iraq and into other countries as well. And all those countries are just on a very, very tight balance itself. So this is really the most dangerous chance of a breakdown from a controlled but dangerous conflict into something regional that we've seen so far. So and whether it be sort of violence of war, or whether it be the impact of things like refugees and displaced persons, or even what we're now appear to be contemplating, it was announced today, that we're looking seriously at how we might evacuate up to 10,000 British entitled persons from Lebanon. That's a major military operation. So we try to conduct that major military operation in the midst of a hot war. That is a recipe for a very dangerous situation.
Yeah, I should have mentioned that earlier, that we've moved a load of troops to Cyprus, I think it is, with a view to possibly having to do that, to evacuate 10,000 British citizens. So the situation is tense is the understatement of the century.
That's right.
Simon, always a pleasure to talk to you. Fascinating stuff, if not a little disconcerting. Simon Diggins, military defence analyst, not in Kabul. He used to be based there.